Welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast, made for women who want their healthiest years to be ahead of them, not behind them. Join your host, Courtney Townley, right now as she breaks down the fairy tale health story you have been chasing all of your life into sensible action steps and lasting change. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast. This is your host, Courtney Townley. As always, thank you so much for taking time to be here with me. So today we're going to do something a little different here on the podcast. I am going to start off by talking a little bit about the value of community and connection, specifically along your health journey. Why these two things are such essential ingredients to your overall health story. But then I am going to share an interview that I recently did with a member of my Rumble and Rise community. And this interview, I'm sharing it with you for a couple of reasons. Number one, it speaks so beautifully to this conversation of community and connection. And secondly, because a lot of you have reached out to me with emails and private messages asking me more details about the Rumble and Rise experience and what it's like to be a member of this community. So I figured, why not bring some community members on and let you hear it from their mouth? So this will actually be a series of interviews. Today I'm dropping the first one, but over the course of the next several weeks, I will continue to share these types of interviews at the end of the show. So I hope you find them valuable and inspiring, and so inspiring, in fact, I hope it encourages you to join us inside of the Rumble and Rise community. Now, a lot of you know that the crux of the work that I do in the world with my students and clients is to really help them get clarity on what health looks like in the wholeness of their personal life, right? So where are the gaps in their personal life for the level of health that they're truly craving? And then I arm them with skill sets to help them fill those gaps. And those skill sets are largely helping them to manage their thoughts and their emotions and their behaviors so they can attain the level of health they truly want in their life. And if you've been a longtime listener, you know that I define health as much bigger than just physical health. We're talking about health across your life. So in essence, I kind of act as a Sherpa to my clients. I help to guide them back to themselves and really help them step into a place of self-leadership in their life. And I've done many, many podcasts on the importance of self-leadership. In fact, I don't think there's a podcast in 230 episodes that I have not in some way spoken to the importance of self-leadership. But I just want to summarize here, for those of you who may be new listeners, the context in which I speak to self-leadership. So self-leadership is really in the work that I do broken down into four primary parts. The entry point for self-leadership is really developing self-respect. Because without self-respect, you are never going to show up for yourself. So nothing else will really matter. So self-respect is really having a sense that you are worthy of your own time and attention. And as you set out to create change and take charge of your life in new ways, you recognize that there will be obstacles, there will be challenges, there will be failures, there will be a lot of mistakes. And how you treat yourself in those moments has everything to do with your self-respect. So self-respect is really the gateway to the work that I do. And it, unfortunately, lack of self-respect is a big problem that I see in the world of women's health, right? A lot of women don't have self-respect. And so they are constantly struggling to even get started. Or they get started and then they really beat themselves up when the first obstacle or mistake shows up. And that just prevents them from going any further. The second thing that I teach is self-awareness. Really staying awake to how you are moving through the world and making sure you like how you are moving through the world. And this seems like, so obvious and simple, but we are living in a world of sleepwalkers. We are living in a world where people are so busy and so distracted and so mentally occupied by the outside world, they aren't really aware of how they're thinking, how they're feeling, or even what they're doing that is creating the results in their life. And of course, that's all problematic because you can't change what you don't see. So self-awareness is not fun, but it is oh so necessary because it kind of points out the gaps between where you currently are and the life you really want to be living. And once we see those gaps, we have such an opportunity to start developing ourselves. So this is the third thing that I teach is self-development. Recognizing the behaviors that are depleting you and doing the work to realign your behaviors into ones that nourish you. And yes, this is a process of self-discipline, which I know, such an unsexy word, self-discipline. But self-discipline is born out of that self-respect we talked about earlier. So self-discipline, the way I teach it, is a very loving and kind thing to do. And there's a very graceful way to develop the skill set of self-discipline. And once you start showing up for yourself more consistently, you start following through with the promises that you make to yourself more consistently, you start developing more self-trust. And this is kind of that final piece of self-leadership. When you trust yourself to do what you said you would do for yourself, your life expands, your confidence skyrockets, and you start feeling so much more fulfilled and so much more at peace with how you're living your life. Here's the thing I want to clarify about self-leadership. Self-leadership means that you are not looking to others to make decisions for you. You're not looking to others to validate you, and you're not looking to others to shape your life. You are taking ownership of that work. That being said, self-leadership is not meant to be a solo mission. You are not meant to go it alone. We as humans are not meant to do hard things by ourselves. And I believe that good leaders know that everyone needs help to be their best. I've talked in several different episodes in this show about all of the amazing support systems and different people I have had help me throughout my life in areas I was struggling with. And literally from my early 20s, so over 20 years ago, I started hiring coaches and mentors and seeking out communities that were populated with people who understood my desire for change and could help to support me in that change. And that support looks a little different, right? Depending on where I am in my process. Sometimes that support looks like literally having to learn skill sets to climb a little higher. Sometimes that support looks like tripping over my own feet and having people help me to stand back up, reminding me that I'm capable, that I've got this, that I've done hard things before. So in my life, that support has looked like so many different things throughout the years. But movement coaches, business coaches, therapists, all kinds of different communities that have helped me to do my own personal development. And I can't imagine a period in my life where I will ever step away from that. Because I know that I do better in community with connection. So self-leadership isn't isolation. In fact, I believe that healthy leadership is only possible with healthy support systems. And healthy support systems always make me think of like the root system of a tree. If you think about the root system of a tree, roots can only grow in environments that provide the proper nutrition, right? Like you can't grow a strong root system in soil that can't support the massiveness of a tree. There's a book I read years ago. It's called The Hidden Life of Trees. I highly recommend it. I will post it actually in the show notes for any of you who are interested in it. But it's a fascinating book about how intelligent trees are and how they communicate with each other and how they share nutrients and how they support each other. And there are a lot of experiments talked about in this book that confirms that trees are, again, talking to each other all the time and sharing nutrients and support, forming a really complex system that the authors refer to as the Wood Wide Web. And it makes sense, right? So you think of something as massive as a tree that stands alone, right? Even if it's in a forest, right? Trees are independent of each other. When you look at them, you look at their trunk, you look at their branches, and yet underneath, they're supporting each other. They're feeding each other. They're talking to each other. I tell you this because I think it's such a great reminder that if you want to be a powerful leader in your own life, you must seek out environments that provide you with the proper nutrition and encourage that kind of growth. For years, when in my coaching practice was exclusively talking to clients in private one-to-one about the struggles they were facing along their health journey. And then, of course, we would map out a plan for how they would change, right? Like what they would commit to the following week. And while, of course, every individual, every client I worked with was uniquely special, the problems they were facing were not. I was coaching people on the same types of challenges all the time. And what's interesting about that is I was simultaneously really resistant to group coaching because I thought if I stepped into group coaching, people are going to lose this whole private coaching value. Now, I will say that I do believe that private coaching accelerates the process. It can, depending on what you're rumbling with. So I very much still do private coaching today, but all of my private coaching clients are now a part of my group community. Because when I opened myself up to group coaching, I was blown away by how much value there was in that experience for the women I was working with. So women were starting to hear each other's stories, which helped them to normalize their own struggles and challenges. Being in a community, a group coaching environment helped women to hold space for each other, right? They started to provide nutrition to each other and simply acknowledge that they weren't not alone, that their problems were not uniquely their problems. And there's so much power in that. So I share this with you because community and connection, I think in today's world, can so easily be overlooked. Like, we're online connecting with a lot of people. You might even have a lot of people in your life. But I know a lot of people surrounded by a lot of communities that are very lonely because they're not in the right communities. So I wanted to share with you, I came across this woman. Her name is Emma Sapala, and she's a psychologist and an author. She's a lecturer at Yale School of Management, and she is Stanford educated. So she writes a lot about the power of connection and community. And I wanted to read a passage from an article of hers. It says this: "We are profoundly social creatures. At the root of all of our desires is a need to be loved and to belong. A sense of social connection is one of our fundamental human needs, and it impacts our health, both mentally and physically. One study showed that a lack of social connection is a greater detriment to our health than obesity, smoking, and high blood pressure. On the flip side, strong social connections leads to a 50% increased chance of longevity. Social connection strengthens our immune system, helps us to recover from disease faster, and people who feel more connected to others have lower rates of anxiety and depression. Social connectedness generates a positive feedback loop of social, emotional, and physical well-being. Unfortunately, the opposite is also true for those who lack social connectedness. Low social connectedness has been generally associated with declines in physical and psychological health, as well as a higher propensity to antisocial behavior that leads to further isolation." End quote. So community shapes us. It supports us, and it helps us to normalize the human experience. And it's not just community, it's the right community. So if you are a woman listening to this who is really struggling along her health journey right now, I want you to pause and consider the quality of the community you're in right now for the specific change you are trying to make or the life you are trying to cultivate. Do you have community? Is it the right community? Now, when I say the right community, please don't hear me saying you got to go out and ditch all the people that you have currently in your life. That is not at all what I'm suggesting. But what I tell my clients all the time is you might need to make new friends. You might need to find some new communities of support to help you get the nutrition you need to step fully into being the director of your own life. So when we are supported by the right people, we feel more confident to stand on our own. Isn't that crazy? But self-leadership, again, is not a solo mission. So if you need community, I want you to make sure you listen to this interview that I'm going to share with you right now. So this is an interview that I recently did with a member of Rumble and Rise. Her name is Heather Ring. And Heather is a wife, a mother of 3. She's a newly practicing health coach, and she's really a lifelong mover and foodie. She is the founder of what's called Nutritious Habits in Mercer Island, Washington. And Heather and her family spent 10 years abroad in Sydney, London, and Hong Kong. And each international move opened up doors to inspiring people in culinary, movement, and wellness worlds. So her family then decided to clean up their lifestyle in middle age, and they've never felt better. And they're now really passionate about aging vibrantly and gracefully and sharing that with others. So you may hear that intro and think, well, why did she join a community to help with health? Listen in, because I think you might be surprised, right? We all rumble with self-doubt. We all rumble with gaps in our health journey in different ways. So like I said earlier, health is not always physical, right? Our health pursuits are not always related to physical health pursuits. Health is so much bigger than just physicality. So sit back, enjoy the interview, and if it strikes a chord with you and you are interested in finding out more about Rumble and Rise, it's such an affordable membership. You can head on over to graceandgrit.com/ready to rumble. And you can always go to my website as well, graceandgrit.com, and you'll find it on the programs page. All right, Heather, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad you decided to come on the show.
So happy to be here, Courtney.
Is this your first ever podcast interview?
It is. I'm a little intimidated.
Oh my gosh, don't be. It's just a conversation. And maybe thousands of people will be listening to it eventually, but it's just you and I.
Great.
So why don't you share a little bit about how you came into my work? Because we kind of have an interesting story in terms of how we connected.
We definitely do. So I am 46 years old right now, mother of three. And up until a couple of years ago, we were living in Hong Kong on a long-term work assignment. And I had gotten into the movement practice kind of under the Ido Portal lineage. Yeah. And my teacher, Andres Vesca, was very inspiring. And as I kind of got more into that world, I kept thinking, how do moms do this, on a long-term basis? Because there's so much time commitment involved, and it's so complicated, and it's just really hard, but I like what I'm doing here. And I started looking on the internet for women and moms who might be doing this movement practice. And in that search, I found you. I think at the time you were training pretty seriously in the Ido Portal method. And I saw a video that you had posted. I think you had been practicing for a year or something, and your results were amazing. And I just had to get in touch with you. And I'm like, how are you doing it? I know you're a mom. How can I keep practicing and still make a life for myself and have time for myself and not injure myself and that sort of thing. And so through that, you had responded very, very thoroughly to my message. And so I started feeling a little bit better about it. And I figured out that I could still practice and not have to do it. It's just this like super intense way, that a lot of Ido's mentorship students were doing. And through that, I found some balance in that practice. And I continue to find that balance today and not have such high expectations of myself. I don't need to be a world-class athlete as a mother of three in my mid 40s, but I can still have it be a big part of my life. But anyway, through that, I found your podcast as well. I think I had gone to your website and you had just launched it maybe. And I started listening to your podcast, and I realized that you were so much more than just the movement piece. Like that was just scraping the surface. And I really, really connected with everything that you were sharing in your podcast, both your own teachings and that of your guests, and continued to listen throughout the years. We moved back to Seattle a couple of years ago, and I've since become, one of your most rabid fans. And in that process, I went through Precision Nutrition's level 1 coaching program and became a certified health coach myself. And mostly I kind of did it just for my own interests and learning about nutrition and how to be a healthier human in addition to just moving better. And realized that now that my kids were a little bit older, I could do a little bit more with my time. And so I became very interested in launching my own business and spending my time doing this for my community and helping other women. And of course, I've never been an entrepreneur or launched my own business. And so I had no idea what to do. And so I, of course, turned to you and I said, hey, how can you help me here? I don't even know how to get started. And so you and I had I think 6 months of private coaching. And once that was over, and that was fantastic, by the way, that did get me launched. And I had so many questions. I definitely couldn't have done it without you. And of course, got involved with the Rumble and Rise community through that process and went through the consistency code, which I very strongly connected with. It's funny, like most people go there for the physical health reasons, but for me, it was much more about the other aspects of the deep health conversation, your mental health and your existential health and relationships and things like that. And so using that filter for those aspects of my life, I think have been super helpful, more than therapy, which I'm happy to.
I love it. I actually hear that a lot.
Yeah. So here we are, now I'm full-fledged Rumble and Rise member. I am super busy, so I can't always make the calls, but I do listen to them on the private podcast, and I find them very valuable.
Yeah. Well, I love your story because I've watched you go from this space of personal development and really focusing on your own movement practice and uplifting your own health and trying to expand, right, your own definition of health and what balance within that looks like, to the point now that you're embarking on your own business and helping other people to do the same. So it's been such an awesome thing to witness. And I have been so honored to be a part of it, for sure. I would love for you to tell listeners, because I talk a lot about Rumble and Rise throughout the podcast, right? I'm always trying to encourage people to sign up because this membership is always open. So I never close the doors to it. And I thought it would be just really helpful to bring on some current members to hear from the horse's mouth what the experience is really like. So how would you describe in your own words what Rumble and Rise really is? Like, yes, it's a membership site, but what does it offer?
So what I would say is that if there are people out there who are fans of your podcast, this goes a layer much deeper and much more practically into self-improvement. So you get the actual tools through your teaching and through your worksheets and through coaching, on the group calls to actually work through some of the pain points in your life, whatever they may be. And for a very reasonable rate per month, you have the option to send you a question at some point ahead of these calls and get that coaching on the call. And not only do we hear from you what suggestions you might have, but there are typically others on the call who can relate, or they might have a little nugget to offer. And then, of course, there are questions that others are asking on that call that maybe you had that question as well. And you're so glad that they asked it because maybe you didn't think about it at the time, or you were too embarrassed to ask that question. And I have just always found that there are so many good nuggets that I hear from other members who are on the call. And for me, as a new and budding health coach, I think it's really interesting for me to hear what others are struggling with and how I might help others who ask me the same question in the future. So I look at it from that perspective as well.
Yeah. Well, I love hearing about how, like, you first found me anyway, right? You were looking for that connection, that community, like like-minded women who were involved in the movement practice and raising kids and dealing with all the normal rumbles of life. And it's so interesting because I think that one of the biggest benefits of Rumble and Rise is the community, right? That we get onto those calls and you hear other women talk and the response is almost like, oh, it's not just me, right? Other people are having these same challenges, which I think is just, it's so healthy to normalize those challenges.
That's right. I think in this day and age, women hold themselves on such a high pedestal, or the media certainly doesn't make it easy. There's all these perfect celebrities out there that tend to be the example of how to live your life, how you should look, how you should feel, how you should behave in your everyday life. And I think social media has made it super hard because you're just seeing the highlight reel of people's lives and you start comparing yourselves to that. And I just don't think that's been helpful at all. And, we do talk about that sometimes in Rumble and Rise and how to manage your social media intake and kind of regulate your response to it.
Yeah. Take responsibility for what is in your feed. Absolutely. So what do you think is the most impactful thing that you've learned since being inside of Rumble and Rise?
Oh my gosh, it definitely has to be the basics of the consistency code and managing your thoughts, because you can apply it to anything, whether that is your physical health, whether you are dealing with a relationship issue, if you've got some sort of a business idea that you've been scared to launch and you're just having a lot of feelings and thoughts and beliefs and emotions about whatever it is. And I just think it's such a solid process, for managing through struggle.
Yeah.
So that by far is the best and most consistent thing, no pun intended, of the consistency code. And of course, you just have so many good masterclasses as well. And I've enjoyed going back to all the masterclasses that you posted on the Rumble and Rise site. And for what we pay, I just think the content is so valuable. You can't get that anywhere else.
I love it. Yeah, it's kind of a one-stop shop, right? Like there's just so much information. I offer a new masterclass every single month. And you're invited to a number of group coaching calls every month. And the consistency code, which you've mentioned a couple times, is really the highly recommended starting place. So as soon as you sign up for Rumble and Rise, you basically get pushed into the consistency code, which is 4 different modules. And it's really the foundation of all the work that we do inside of the Rumble and Rise community. So I think I know the answer to this next question, but I want to hear it from your own mouth. What do you think your biggest win has been since you've joined the community?
Oh, launching my business for sure. For sure. I mean, Courtney, I would not have done it without the consistency code kind of being the background for having the confidence to actually go for it. I mean, again, I've just never done this before, and it was so intimidating, and I just didn't think that it was possible. I had so much imposter syndrome, getting going with knowing that I have this knowledge, but how can I use it to help others? And are others going to look at me as an expert that is ahead of them and could actually help them with this stuff? And I think with your encouragement and like lots and lots and lots of practical suggestions as well to get going, all the technical stuff that was so intimidating, you helped me kind of chunk that into realistic, bits of work to go after in a sequential order so that I could get the result in the end that I was after. Yeah. And I'm still growing, I'm not 100% there yet. I mean, this is going to be a long-term process, but I'm doing it, I can't believe I'm doing it. Right. Like, I think we first talked, I think it was like June or July of last year.
Yeah.
And by September, I had actually started coaching a test group, which I couldn't believe I could even do. It was so intimidating on that first call. But once I just started doing and practicing, the confidence came with it. And it was through the doing that the confidence and the realization that I can do it actually happened. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's just, you need somebody on your side to give you that little nudge and say, you can do it. And sure enough, I could. And then in January, I started taking my first pay clients.
Yeah. Yeah. So you had to take a little bit of a leap of faith, right? That you could do this thing. Mm-hmm. And you had to be very kind to yourself in the process. And like you said, break things down into small enough chunks, which I think women are often not so great at because we want to do everything at once. Mm-hmm. And then you had so much opportunity to manage your brain because your brain was throwing you lots of beliefs that weren't serving you, right? Or telling you all the reasons why maybe you shouldn't be doing this or why you weren't cut out for this. And so you got to work with all of that in order to develop yourself to where you are right now.
Yes, 100% true. And it was an enjoyable process. I think that there's such a sense of accomplishment on the other side of doing hard things, whatever the hard things are.
I agree.
And I guess that started for me with like movement, it was so hard. And I was like, how can I possibly do this practice? And it was through the perseverance and the daily showing up for it that in the end, I couldn't believe how much more fit I became and how much better I felt and how I could do stuff in my 40s that I could never do in my 20s.
Yeah.
And it was that same showing up with building my business that ended up getting me there, in the end. But I think that was actually a lot more intimidating. I really needed your help to get me there. Yeah.
So I love this because a lot of people are probably listening to this and they're thinking, okay, well, because Rumble and Rise really is a space where we expand our definition of health and then we do the work that's going to help us attain that level of health. Mm-hmm. And for you, a part of your health journey has been starting this business, right? And this is something that a lot of people never think of when they think about the health conversation, right? Because the health conversation is so often boiled down to exercise and diet, right? Mm-hmm. These are the things that are going to improve our health. But I'm curious for you to let us know how you think following your heart and leaning into the discomfort of starting this business has helped you to elevate your own health.
Yeah. Okay. So for me, moving back to Seattle was a really big life transition. And I would say represented my midlife crisis. So I spent 12 years of following my husband, and everything we did was kind of around his goals. And it was never about me. Of course, I enjoyed the benefits of all the international travel. We also lived in Sydney and London for those who might not know. So 3 international assignments. And then I get back to Seattle and it's like, who am I? what am I doing with my life?
Mm-hmm.
For me, that was really, really stressful. I didn't feel like I had anything to contribute to the world beyond being a mother and a wife. And that just wasn't enough for me. And I knew that intuitively. And so I knew that I wanted to do something within the community, whether it was paid work or unpaid work. I didn't know what that looked like at the time. And I also realized I needed to be passionate about whatever the thing was that I was contributing. And so I knew I loved movement and nutrition and helping women and just aging gracefully and with confidence. And so it kind of naturally led into this path of, well, this could be my thing. Could be, just at the time. And from a possibility point to a actually doing it point, I didn't really know how to get there. And that for me was also very stressful. I'm like, okay, so I've identified this thing, but now I'm stressed out because I can't figure out how to do it, or actually get started. So yeah, that for me has been a huge part of my own health. It's my confidence. It's my mental health. It's my relationship with my husband. I was very resentful of him because of the path he took us down. I didn't realize it at the time, but it definitely impacted our relationship as well. And, so I just realized that I was kind of being edgy with my kids too. And I realized a lot of that was because I myself wasn't happy with who I was as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
I just felt incomplete.
Yeah.
And so I think it was important for me to figure out what that thing was that was missing and to actively go after it and not feel like I needed to do it overnight. And, here I am, it's April, and we started the conversation about what's possible less than a year ago. So in 9 months time, I can't believe everything that's happened. I didn't know how to build a website. I didn't know how to figure out, how to build a logo. I didn't know how to reach out to people. I didn't know how to post stuff in social media. I mean, all this stuff was just so beyond my skill level at the time. And when you think about everything that needs to be done, even things like I need my own Zoom account. I need my own scheduling, all of this stuff. I was like, holy cow, getting a business license. I just needed to really make a list and not feel like I needed to do everything on every day. It was just a little bit every day was enough, and I was that much further ahead. And eventually getting to this point, you just think about when you look back on it, it's really not been that much time that has passed from the beginning, and look what's possible.
Well, and that commitment to doing just a little bit over that 9 months, look where it took you.
Yeah.
Right. Versus trying to do everything really quickly, getting burnt out, and then just giving it all up and convincing yourself it wasn't possible. Because I think the same thing happens to a lot of women in any arena of their health, right? Like a woman who has, let's just say 100 pounds to lose, right? She looks at that 100-pound number and it's intimidating as hell.
Oh,
and it just feels so far away. And all the things that she has to learn to do to accomplish that, it can paralyze her before she even starts.
Yeah.
Right. And so giving ourselves the grace to just do a little bit more than we did yesterday is always the best starting point, right? Having the vision of where we want to go is so important, but then really coming back to, well, what am I doing today in dedication to that?
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
you were so willing to go there. You're so coachable, which obviously is why it works, right? It was why I think you had so much success, is because you were willing to scale things back and take it little bit by little bit. And that compounded and got you to where you are now, which is so cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a work in progress, right? All of us, regardless of what it is.
So what would you say to a woman who is sitting on the fence about joining Rumble and Rise, who's been a longtime podcast listener, right? Listens every week, because there's a lot of them. I get the emails, I get the DMs, people who've been listening forever, but still aren't members of Rumble and Rise. What would you say to them?
Oh my gosh. Well, it's a very inexpensive way to get Courtney times 10, plus the support of a huge community of like-minded women, lots and lots more resources that you wouldn't get on the podcast that are very practical and actionable. And it's the way to actually make forward progress. I mean, you have all the tools and the support that you would need to actually execute on your goals. I think the podcast is very inspirational, and you teach a lot on the podcast, but you teach so much more in depth within the Rumble and Rise site.
So much more. Yeah. It's a big difference.
Huge.
For sure.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay. So I want to know, moving forward, what is something that you're committed to creating for yourself that also makes you nervous? Because I always have this philosophy that I always share, that new level, new devil, right? Like 9 months later, here you are, you've created more success than you thought possible. You're doing really great with the things you committed to, but you also have more confidence, which means there's more, you kind of set your goals higher, right?
For sure.
So I'm curious what's up for you.
Well, I know for me that I have wanted to teach movement classes for a long time. And I've always been intimidated that, well, I'm not the teacher, I'm just the student. And I've been a student, of it for about 6 years now. And meanwhile, people have asked, well, how do I get started? How can I get here? And I just feel like there's a way for me to just start, just like I sort of did with launching my business. I mean, take it bit by bit. I have an opportunity sometime over the next 6 months or so to start teaching on Mercer Island, which is where I live. Yeah. And I just need to have the confidence to do it. And so you should probably check in with me in 6 months.
Oh, I will be. Yeah. And I just want to offer you here and now, right? The thought, like, I'm always a student, never the teacher. Like, you've got to drop that. You are a teacher. You're already teaching. Look at all the women you're helping in this other capacity. You are a teacher. And reminding yourself of that belief, right? Reminding yourself to repeat that thought is going to help you to show up as a teacher in that space as well.
Yes. Thank you for that reminder.
Yeah. All it takes to be a teacher is to be just a little further ahead, right? Like to have a little something to offer. You have a lot of something to offer. You're definitely further ahead than the people who are seeking out your services. And I love that for you, right? Because I know movement's been a lifelong passion, or at least in recent years, right? It's been a big passion.
For sure.
And to share that with others is, I know, going to continue to take your health to new heights.
Exactly. Well, you can't do one without the other. Like if we're talking about the physical health discussion, like I really help women right now through the health coaching aspect. A lot of times it's mostly related to nutrition because a lot of time that's how they kind of come to me. Sure. We end up talking about a lot of other stuff as well. But, movement does not have to be a chore. And that's a message that I hope to convey, with my classes. Like you do this because you want to feel great in your body and you want to have the ability to lift heavy things or be able to squat comfortably. And you want to be able to twist easily in the car to reach for something in the back seat. It sounds so basic, but when people lose these mobility patterns, life can be really uncomfortable. And, movement in general does not have to be it doesn't have to be hard or it doesn't have to be super sweaty. It just needs to be how you move throughout your day. And some people just need a bit of help with getting some of their mobility and strength back so that life just gets a lot easier.
Yeah. Well, and I think it also doesn't need to be, standard strength training or sort of, it doesn't have to look a particular way, which I think sort of that, Edo lineage is so beautiful at teaching, that there's so much play involved and there's so much experiment involved. And I think if people could tap more into those qualities, which you're so great at teaching, it would help them to become more passionate about movement because it's not boxed into this particular thing.
That's right. Humans did not evolve to sit in a chair all day and then really aggressively exercise for an hour at 5 p.m., when they get off work. And in fact, I think a lot of people get injured because they do that. They're so sedentary. And so their bodies kind of, calcify during those sitting hours. And then they try to just go for it and go crazy for an hour. And it's just not a healthy way to be. And, fortunately, I've been in a situation where I haven't been at a desk job for the last, let's call it 10 years or so. And I've had the opportunity to get up and like move every hour. And, I do all the housework, even housework, like changing all the beds for 5 people can be a lot of work, and that you should be able to execute that and like easily lift the mattresses and carry heavy loads up and down the stairs. My son has a bunk bed. Anyone ever tried to change the top of a bunk bed?
I never thought about that, but
that is super hard. I mean, like talk about it. Like if you can change, that's like my test. Like if I can easily change the top bed on the bunk bed, I'm doing all right.
I love it. That's so great. It's a great analogy. Well, anything else you want to say in closing?
I guess I'd just say, there's no reason to hesitate, if people are on the fence with this thing. I mean, I personally bought into the year-long membership because I think you give us like 2 months for free if we do that. And I mean, there's never been a month where I haven't learned something.
Yeah.
And there hasn't even been a group coaching call where I haven't learned something.
Yeah.
You obviously continuously post like really quality content. And I like how sometimes with the master classes, you'll go into depth, there's like a part 1 or a part 2, because there's so much to a lot of these conversations. And then I just say, I don't know, thank you. Thank you. You've been such an inspiration and a great coach and a mentor. And I will be a forever fan of yours, Courtney. So
it goes both ways, my friend, for sure. It's been such a joy to watch you and just to see your own world expand and to see you tap into these new possibilities for your life. And I'm so honored to have you in the community. And I really appreciate you taking the time to share with us.
Well, happy to do it.
All right. I will see you soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Contrary to what popular culture has conditioned you to believe, your life's work is not to obsessively worry about your weight or how to look when you put on a swimsuit. The real work of your life is to like who you are, what you do, and why you do the things you do. The real work of your life is to become a fully expressed and authentic human, whatever that means for you. And you simply cannot do that work if you're feeling mentally and physically depleted. So I would love to invite you to join Rumble and Rise, which is my private community where I help women step into self-leadership so they can lead themselves into their happiest and healthiest future. If you'd like to join us inside this community, you can read about all the details and all of the goodness that this space provides by heading on over to graceandgrit.com/ready to rumble. Thank you for listening to the Grace and Grit podcast. It is time to mend the fabric of the female health story, and it starts with you taking radical responsibility for your own self-care. You are worth the effort, and with a little grace and grit, anything is possible.